I don't have to like do cartwheels and guzzle a Miller Lite to say, hey, I'm having the time of my life. Nobody enjoys watching us play well more than me. Trust me on that.
This is the Sean Miller Podcast, presented by Deer Park Roofing. Now, here's your hosts, Paul Fritschner and Adam Baum, with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.
Welcome back to the Sean Miller Podcast. Paul Fritschner, Adam Baum, the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller. As always, we want to thank our sponsors, Deer Park Roofing, payroll partners, TGE Solar, everybody for helping make this show possible. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if that's where you're watching. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those, hit that subscribe button. Leave a rating and a review. Coach, it is great to be with you. We're sitting here today. We're in the gym. It's nice to be here. It's a little chilly. Here, getting into January, but we're coming off a win yesterday over Providence. So Adam and I thought it would be good to sit down with you. We haven't gotten a chance, just the three of us, to catch up on the season and kind of do a season in review. Give us your thoughts on where the team stands right now and just to kind of set the tone. Xavier's sitting at 8-8 right now on the season, 500, but you look at the net, moving up 18 spots overnight in the net from 61 to 43. KenPom just gradually climbing. It climbed 10 spots yesterday up to 31. So the metrics really liking where Xavier is right now, and you're coming off a great performance yesterday from Trey Green, from Des Claude. Great to see both of those guys after some struggles over the last couple of weeks really start to generate some momentum forward. But from your perspective on the season now, a few games into the Big East, a couple Big East wins under your belt, how do things stand? How is the season going for you?
It's certainly been difficult in a lot of ways. And I would just start with this. At this point, if we just stop the season today, I think we have the fifth most difficult schedule in college basketball. So if you start and say there's 360 plus teams, each of them has a chance to play the America's number one schedule. There's only 4 that have played a more difficult schedule than us. So when you think about 8-8, and clearly a couple games, man, I wish we had back. But the totality of our schedule based on the team that we have doesn't match up. I wish we wouldn't have played, where we're at in terms of the number 5 ranked schedule. I think from a confidence perspective, at times earlier on, being able to learn lessons and not have to be penalized with a difficult loss, and that would have been, in hindsight, a great thing for us, right? But there are no do-overs in what we do, and I think what we've learned as a team and really as a program is you can also flip the script and say, we're as battle-tested. We've seen virtually every style that you can see as a college basketball team. We've played away from home. We've played tough home games. We've been matched up and been in these battles where at the 8-minute mark of the game, virtually in all 16 games we've been in, it could be win-lose.
Yeah.
Very, very seldom has the game been decided midway through the second half one way or the other. So you learn sometimes that by doing that, your guys get hardened. They become more fearless. And from a confidence perspective, you have a resolve about you that you can fight all the way until the final buzzer. And I feel like we've developed some of that here, especially over the last 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks, where, we may not win the game, but we're going to fight all the way to the final buzzer. And I've been very proud of our staff, of our team, the players to be that team. And I think we felt a little bit of that against Providence yesterday, where you're on the road. If you judged us midway through the first half, it didn't look well, didn't look good. But we've been in that situation 15 other times, and we kept fighting. We stayed with it, and we ended up playing maybe our best half of basketball of the year in the second half, away from home, in front of a really tough crowd. So no doubt we left that game feeling good.
I think one of the really interesting things when you look at this schedule, I was going back through it yesterday, and 6 of the 8 losses have been by 7 points or less, but 7 of the 8 wins have been by double digits.
Yeah.
So when you win big. But you look at the KenPom Luck factor, and I think a lot of people look at that and you wonder, okay, what does that mean? Xavier's the 4th lowest team in the country in the KenPom Luck factor, which you're not making any excuses, but I think one of the interesting things you can take away from that is you play a lot of these close games, and one of the things that stat looks at is sometimes those games bounce your ways. And this year, a lot of those close games just haven't gone your way outside of the crosstown shootout that you won by less than double digits. So is there anything you can take away from what this team is learning in those close losses so far?
Yeah, and Paul, again, back to what I said, recognizing the reality of that we've played a very challenging schedule. It's the fact. It's not even an excuse. I think any team that would take on the schedule that we played understands that there's going to be some challenges in that schedule, and clearly that's been a part of our path. I would also say, the luck factor, I get it. Sometimes it's, did the shot go in? Did it not go in? Maybe at Villanova could be a great example. But some of our losses, we rallied. We stayed with it. We ended up making it a tough game. Whereas, again, back to my resolve, where I think if you give in, if you're not as connected or hard playing, that game ends up going the wrong way, baby, by double digits. And here's the last point. Any team that's 8-8 is only going to talk about the things that could have gone better. In other words, man, we were up 4 points with X number of minutes left in this game. We were right there. At halftime, it was tied. You always point to that. I've never met anybody who describes it any differently than that, you know? So I don't want to go down that path. I think the path that KenPom or some of the analytics brings up, that's also reality. And it's that we're doing some really good things against top-notch quality. And as we continue to move forward, if we stay healthy, continue to evolve and improve in between games, and stay the same team that we are, and then grow it and build it and incrementally get better. For example, Trey Green making shots like we know he's capable as a freshman. Freshmen a lot of times hit their stride in the month of January or even February. At that point, they've seen so much. They're no longer the newcomer. They're more familiar and more comfortable. But things like that can start to happen. And if that happens, there's no reason why from this point forward we can't play our best basketball of the year. We talk about that a lot as a team. It's easy to talk about. It's much more difficult to do. But I think yesterday is a good sign that we have more in us.
The Sean Miller Podcast is proud to partner with Deer Park Roofing, a company that's provided elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. Whether your needs are residential or commercial, like the outstanding work on the Cintas Center, the home of Xavier basketball, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is protect what's important, and what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com.
Coach, I think one of the things about college basketball that I've learned from you is, it's so much a results-based business. You talk all the time about the scoreboard never lies. It tells you, it gives you reality. You know exactly how you did when you look at it after a game. But when the results aren't always there necessarily, like you're 8-8, are you pulling from previous seasons where maybe things didn't always go your way? I think with college basketball, you look at your record as a whole, you've had a lot of really good seasons where maybe wins were easier to come by than losses. So how do you sort of navigate when the results aren't always there? Do you look back at your career at some of those seasons that were maybe more difficult?
Well, right now I'm a lot different than I once was. I think all coaches evolve. Think about you guys, like where you'll be a decade from now, or maybe who you are today versus even 4 or 5 years ago. You grow within your industry, and I think you just sometimes you become smarter through mistakes and just things that you wish you could have done better. But as you know it now, when those opportunities present themselves as your path grows and moves forward, you have the opportunity to actually do it a different way. I think for me, and if I ever wrote a book, doubt if I will, but if I did, I think it would be a good one. I would call it The Scoreboard Life, or something like that. Because if everybody in the sales world, whether you're the CEO or you're in the trenches, just actually as that salesperson, was publicly judged on what happened in their last presentation, Like, in other words, did you win or lose? It was that black or white. That profession would be looked upon much differently, because the thing about sports, to your point, Adam, it's so public that you can allow it to become personal. So I think the one thing that I have learned, not saying that I always can do it, but I really try to communicate this as much as I can to our staff, to our players, to my own family and myself, is it's so much about what you do between games. How you communicate, how you go about your business, how you fix problems, how you grow and build on things that are going well, and seeing things in a clear lens, not being misguided by so much of the external things that really become a part of college sports. It's why college sports is so awesome. People care. But to the detriment of it, if things aren't going well, it could really, you can go off the rails. And I think sometimes from an emotional perspective, you feel like dying because you lost the game. And look, losing is really difficult, especially on a coach and the staff. But you have to be able to accept it, learn from it, grow. And then it's like we did it from the UConn game. As difficult as it is to lose a home game in the Cintas Center, even to a terrific team like UConn, it was so much about us being able to learn from it, leave it, and then get ready for our next challenge, which is at Providence. No easy task. We now face the reality of things went well at Providence, and we have an equally quick turnaround. Can we learn from the things we didn't do well in that big win, build on the things we did, and be the best that we can be in our next game against Butler, who's a very good team? So to answer your question of what have you learned over time, it's a little bit like today's NFL. It's those organizations that just seem to be able to deal with the injury that happened last Sunday, the tough loss, the big win, the travel that everyone has to do or accept. And then that next Sunday, can you become the most ready and best you can be? Because it's just like parity. In week 17, you have half of the league in the NFL trying to make the playoffs. It's amazing. What separates the NFL is a game, 2 games, 1 injury, a team that maybe wasn't as ready. And I think in this year's Big East Conference, because it's so good and the parity exists at such a high level, that the difference between finishing in 3rd place and 7th, I didn't say 11th and 1st or 10th and 2nd, but the difference between 7th and 2nd is about 5 plays, 1 game, 2 games. So as we're in that, the details matter, and what we do between one contest and the next, not getting too high, not getting too low, seeing it as a true process. I think that not only helps develop the team that we're currently coaching, but more important here at Xavier is to build the program, to continue to move forward and grow something, build it. I use the word grow a lot. You could replace that with build. Just constantly trying to be better than you once were. And here, look, the bar is pretty high. There's been some great teams and programs. We have sustained excellence here for so long that what do I mean by building the program? Well, in today's Big East, can you be a perennial, can you be a year in, year out team that can vie for those top spots? I mean, that would be an amazing accomplishment, but that's a huge challenge. So that's what we're building towards.
I think it's interesting hearing you say 2nd and 7th, because especially now with the Big East going to 11 teams, that's the difference between playing on Wednesday or getting that bye into Thursday and getting that extra day off in the Big East tournament. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. So when it boils down to having your guys understand that, hey, there are some huge implications for remembering to block out here on this shot toward the end of the game, or make those little plays, those little things that a lot of these new players are still getting acclimated to in your system.
So a great example is when we lost the game at Villanova, we had a couple shots to either go up, and then we had 1 shot or 2 shots to potentially win the game. And so much of the aftermath of a game like that is going to be centered on who shot the shots. And it was Des Claude or Dayvion McKnight. I think we had 3 of them. And man, he could have made the shot. That was right there. Should have been a foul, should not have been a foul, et cetera. But the reality of that game is, at the 8-minute mark, we as a team did an amazing job of putting ourselves in a position to win the game on the road against an experienced good team and against their crowd. At the 8-minute mark, if we would have stopped play, Villanova had the game in hand. So we can't lose sight of it. It's not about the last play. It's about every play in that game that mattered. And as we reviewed what allowed us to be there, to have a chance to win, and really a couple problem areas that we could have done better, that's the focus, not the last shot. And as it applies to Dez, we want Dez to take the next last shot and have the confidence to know, was it a quality shot? Yes. Did you try to miss it? Of course not. On the one layup, could they have called a foul? Absolutely. So we live with the consequences of it didn't work out. Next time it will. But let's not lose sight of the 40-minute game and so many different things in that game that we either did well or didn't do well. I think the more experienced and seasoned you are as a coach and even a player, the more you see our season like that and not the emotional roller coaster that can really follow parity in the Big East Conference, especially in our case, where we have a few things going against our roster. The inexperience, losing Zach and Jerome, which has been well documented. You know, we're not walking out at the jump ball saying, we have room for error tonight. And if we don't play our best, I still think we can win. I haven't felt that way ever this season, and I don't think our players have either because of the schedule we've played. So it's a matter of being tested, hardened, experienced in a different way. And I go back to what we talked about a little bit ago. Maybe our best basketball is in front of us because of some of the challenges we've experienced.
I'm from Boston, Massachusetts.
Milano, Italy.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
St. Louis, Missouri.
Abuja, Nigeria.
And I chose
Xavier University
for its education, more opportunities.
for passion because it felt like home. The community, campus life, D1 basketball.
Because I love Cincinnati.
I came here
To be a Musketeer.
I am.
I am.
And we are the faces of Xavier.
Well, I think what's interesting is if you just look at the last 3 games, okay, at Villanova, at home against UConn, and then at Providence. You know, you talk about that Villanova game. Well, a thing that's really easy to sit here now and look at is like, hey, if you guys do a better job defensive rebounding,
That's
and
right.
Villanova doesn't get that many second chance points, you probably win that game. Okay, well then fast forward to UConn. You do a great job cleaning up the rebounding. You controlled the glass. And then you sort of forgot what transition defense was.
That's right.
And that's
Yeah.
another thing where it's like you point at that and you say, hey, man, if we do a better job defending in transition, we give ourselves a chance to win that game. Well, then you fast forward to Providence, and it's almost like there were no fatal flaws in that
Right.
game. And the other thing that's happened in your last 2 games, UConn and Providence, you've started the second half really well. That's been an Achilles heel for you guys this year. So the progression, like starting to figure it out and fix things game to game, I think is there. Would you agree?
For sure. And we're making incremental improvement. It's never going to be night and day.
Yeah.
You know, there's no magic wand. But it's the details between one game, home win, home loss, road win, road loss. It's those days between that matter the most, so that when the next test comes up, which is played out in front of the world, the sports world, that we know what we did between games. And I'll go back to losing to UConn and getting ready for Providence. I thought that our scouting, the staff, our players did a great job of being able to go from, you know, the tough home loss to a really good team to being the most ready we could for a 2:00 away game within 2.5 days, right? Which includes the travel, et cetera. And now the challenge remains, can now we bounce from at Providence to this week where we have 2 home games, one on a Tuesday against Butler, one on a Friday against Georgetown, and again, be the best team we can be on those given nights. So that's the challenge. It's so easy to talk about here with the 2 of you, but the reality of like getting sleep, being able to get home, communication, working, freezing cold outside, right? And being able to deal with our players and communication and the teaching and the effort level. So that's really what we're after. And Adam, you brought up a good thing. What is the one thing that we take from each game? And then if you evaluate that one thing, the next game, do you have the peace of mind that you were better? And that's a good sign that we have a very coachable group, and that some of the different things that we're emphasizing, and we're not trying to emphasize a lot, that we're seeing improvement in it. And so let's hope that this week we have a similar storyline, because I think in a lot of ways it's a big week for us in conference play.
When you look back at some of the things that you've installed in this team, and you think of things that maybe you would have done over the summer if you had had this group together, but one thing that really killed you against Oakland was, maybe not being able to trap the post because you hadn't worked on it in practice. Well, you do that and you have some success in Big East play. Then you start to maybe install a little more full court pressure, 3/4 court pressure. You're starting to see things that, as you've worked on in practice, that even the most casual fan can say, oh, we didn't see them do this 2 weeks ago. Are you consciously taking, okay, we've checked this box, I feel comfortable installing this now to this group of fresh faces, these freshmen that are still getting acclimated with everything?
Yeah, so you're right. How you install different things, it's so much about the team that you're coaching. When you have 10 new players, and 3 of them are international players, and a lot of them are coming directly from high school, I think every coach would agree with me to some level on this. You have to be careful of trying to introduce too much. Just unless you have the basics and the foundation strong. I mean, we can try to trick people and do a variety of things. You're probably not going to be very good at anything. So I think the philosophy that we have is build the strongest foundation we can in the quickest way possible. In hindsight, I wish we would have been a little further along against what you described, Oakland, where one player just really punished us and destroyed us. I'll also tell you this, Paul, like looking back at that period of time, that's also the disadvantage of so much change, because it's not always easy to anticipate that something like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like you almost have to go through some experiences to say, wow, we really struggled in that area more than I realized. And that was a great example of that right there. But hopefully at some point, earlier than later, you get to a point where you feel like you protect yourself against a lot of different challenges. And, I think we're arriving at that final destination where everything that we're trying to do, that we have and now it's a matter of us getting better at it. You talked about full court pressure. It's helped us in a couple games recently. We have to get better at it, though. Some of what we had here at the beginning is a surprise element against the team we're playing, where they haven't really seen a lot of that from us. Now, when you're getting ready to compete against us, that that's a part of what we're doing. So the strategy on their end, the preparation on their end, starts to be to their advantage. So the details of what we do have to be more dialed in.
Stop renting your power, own it. TGE Solar makes it easy to purchase solar panels for your home or business, so you can take control of your monthly electricity bill and start saving today. They'll help you find the best solar system to meet your needs, and their expert in-house installation team makes the process seamless. They're proud to be based in Cincinnati, family owned and operated by a Xavier alum. Mention this podcast and save $1,000. Visit TGEsolar.com to request your free energy evaluation today.
Coach, I was thinking about this yesterday, watching that Providence game. I was watching it with Paul. We were doing a live stream. And it was fun. Like I genuinely had fun watching that game. You haven't necessarily, there have been fun aspects of a lot of games, but from start to finish, I thought that was a really fun game. And I found myself thinking, like, do you have fun during games? Or is it more like, are you just stressed out thinking about all the little things that go into trying to win a college basketball game?
I'll answer this the same way that I answer this when my wife asks me the exact same question. And she doesn't always ask it about the game. She's like, do you ever have fun? Are you, can you smile, et cetera? And look, I don't have to do cartwheels and guzzle a Miller Lite to say, hey, I'm having a time of my life. Nobody enjoys watching us play well more than me. Trust me on that. But sometimes I think when you're in the game, you want to focus it all the way to the final buzzer, making sure that you realize, look, you're in charge of 18 to 22-year-olds, and just them being able to see this for what it is. We want to play to the final buzzer, whether we're winning or losing. That again, back to what we talked about here a few minutes ago, and then when the game ends, then you really can take a deep breath and enjoy a lot of the hard work. But, I told the team after the game, at Providence, I'm not relieved at all. I'm relieved we won. That's not the way to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thrilled. I'm so happy. And because when you see a staff work together closely with the group of players, and you watch a lot of young players team grow, a guy like Trey Green, who's had some tough moments this year. I've coached him hard. We're on him constantly to improve as a defensive player. And to watch him break out on the road at Providence and play the way he did, there's no better feeling as a coach than seeing that happen right before your eyes. So the plane ride home, the pizza, it tastes so much better. The flight, it doesn't matter if you're in the air for 6 hours or 15 minutes, it just feels like, And that's when you can sometimes say, I love this. You lose, it's the opposite. It's like that self-talk of next thing, we're going to be fine. It's not the end of the world. The sun's going to come up, and then it's back to that process. So I try to somewhat stay in between those points. I have never had a problem of handling the emotions with a great win. God, look at him. He's lost his mind. He's so happy. I'm not that. I could certainly go off the deep end with a tough loss. So I'm always pulling it back from the tough loss and trying to enjoy the big win, or I'll win more. But I guess it's just you have to be yourself, right?
You do. Yeah.
What's your go-to pizza flavor?
I like it just no toppings.
Just the cheese?
Yeah, I think that's the true indicator of how good the pizza is.
That's a good point.
There's a pizza place where I grew up. My wife did as well, in Beaver Falls. It's called D&G Pizza. I think it's America's best pizza. Comes in a white box, square cut. It's hard to explain it. I get it mailed to me all the time. When I was at Arizona, people would send it to me. Here in Cincinnati, it's easier. So I love it. I'll put it up against any pizza in the world. So.
All right, you've given us something to think.
Let's do a taste test on the pod.
Yeah,
sometime.
we might need to try this.
Summer.
I tell you what, we're gonna do it on this podcast.
All right,
and I'm gonna let you guys try it. You could compare it to some of the best pizza you've ever eaten.
Okay.
See what you think. All right.
Yeah.
All right. One player in particular I want to ask you about, because I thought it was interesting you talking about him after the game yesterday. We've talked about Trey Green, we've talked about Des Claude, some of these other guys. Dayvion McKnight has really taken control of this team as a point guard. He's not turned the ball over. His assist-to-turnover ratio is incredible. It's one of the best in the conference, if not the best in the conference. But as a first-year point guard in your system, and you talk about instilling confidence in him, he's really performed well this year, especially lately.
He has. I love coaching him. I'll just start there. He is a fun guy to coach. Number one, because he's the same every day. I think everybody focuses on a coach and a staff is supposed to give players confidence. I think there's a lot of truth to that. But players can give a coach and a staff and his teammates confidence. And I think Dayvion's consistent way of going about his business, no matter what the result of the previous game, or even in his case, whether he played well or didn't play well, he shows up. He inspires you around him for you to give him your best, because he's always there. And I think the consistency in his leadership through example is something that I not only feel really good about this season, but next season as well. You know, assist to turnover ratio, maybe I'm right about this. I always think I know more about football than I really do, but quarterbacks of interceptions versus touchdowns. You know, it seems to be like the best of the best always have that dialed in. No point guard that's worth his salt can be considered a good player if they don't have a good assist to turnover ratio. Even Sule Boom last year, who is a prolific shot maker and scorer, one of the other things that was very understated is he did a good job with his assist versus turnover ratio. Colby Jones, as somebody who wasn't our point guard, amazing assist to turnover ratio. Dayvion is leading the Big East Conference in assist to turnover ratio, and he's really, I believe, top 20 in America in assist to turnover ratio. At Providence, he had 8 assists and 2 turnovers. You cannot underestimate that because we also play at a fast tempo, and he has the ball in his hands quite a bit. Defensively, he gives you his best effort. He's starting to take and make open threes. That's something we want him to do more of. And I think his overall improvement from where we are today towards the future, that's a huge point of improvement for him. But free throw percentage, a lot of things that make him what you would call, he is a winning player for us in the Big East Conference. But I would say Dayvion, if he's not the most popular teammate on our team, he's one of them. And I think if you interview our players and talk to them other than Dayvion, they would echo a lot of what I said, and that is there's something to be said about a player who just shows up the same every day and gives high effort. Doesn't have a whole lot to say, but just goes about his business. So he's been a godsend for us. I'm glad you asked me about him, Paul, because it's fun to talk about him simply because he's so unassuming and unselfish. Yeah. We may have to bring him on this podcast.
Just to see if he can talk?
Well, yeah, just to challenge him to see it, to open up. It would be interesting because he would give you some good answers, but trust me, he wouldn't elaborate a whole lot.
No. You know, what I love about Dayvion, you're very kind. You let me and Paul come to practice, and it's pretty rare when we miss one. But in all the practices since he came around, I've never seen him pout. I've never seen him talk back. He's just like, he's steady.
He is.
And I think having guys like that you can count on when maybe you're down 10 points in the first half at Providence. Like, he's never going to be that guy that hangs his head and he's like, man, it's just not our game today.
You know, we talked to Quincy about transferring from Rice to Xavier, and we shared that I knew his coach at Rice very well, Scott Para. And if you remember Quincy talking about Scott Para and the relationship him and Scott had, really to this day is really strong. And that was a big part of, I think, us being able to convince Quincy to come to Xavier. Rick Stansberry, who coached Dayvion at Western Kentucky, who I know, coached at Mississippi State, assistant at Texas A&M, good coach. He's now at Memphis. I don't know if a coach has ever said nicer things about a player than he did about Dayvion. Just who he is every day, the type of player that he is and who he thought he could become, how he thought Dayvion's play at Western Kentucky could translate to a higher level here in the Big East Conference. And that relationship is good, and that relationship is more along the lines of how I would describe Dayvion. When you coach him, he gives you confidence, and he really makes you appreciate who he is because of his consistent high effort level, regardless of circumstances. Game day, shoot around, after a tough loss, early in June when he first came here and he didn't know anybody or anything, to now here in January where he's one of our team's leaders and our starting point guard. Rick Stansberry said so many great things, and I think I'm glad that I listened and we listened to him. And I think it says a lot about Dayvion because that isn't oftentimes the case. Sometimes when you start to dig in and really ask more about a player, you don't hear these types of glowing things. And when I look at Quincy coming here and doing well and Dayvion coming here and doing well, I go back to those conversations that we had with their previous coaches and so many great things that their previous coaches said about them on and off the court.
Coach, a couple more minutes here before you have to go do a film session. So I want to step away from basketball for just a second to wrap this podcast up. And I think one of the most frequent texts that Adam and I have gotten all season after watching this show from people that watch is how good you look physically this year and maybe what you did in the offseason. I don't know how much weight you lost in the offseason, but was it a diet? Was it working out or what was it? Because I think for the amount of people that have texted us about it, we haven't heard from you on it.
So I'll give you two parts. I've always been up and down. I blame my dad. You know, me and him worked at this game so hard from probably like third or fourth grade that when my time ended as a player, I almost had a pact with myself. I'm not working out, or I'm not playing basketball. I'm not doing things. You know, I'm not that guy that, hey, can we play pickup? I would rather do a million other things, whatever those a million other things are, before I play college basketball in any way. It's like I live that life. I practice for two people, you know, so that's my starting point. And then, you know, I'm also like this stress eater. I mean, so think about me and what I do for a living. You know, the harder it gets, the more I eat whatever I can see. That hasn't helped me. So I think just having a better diet, trying to work out smart, listening to my wife more. And I think some of it was a year ago, as great as last season was, and having the opportunity to be back at Xavier and in Cincinnati again, as awesome as all of it was, I probably didn't take care of that part as well. And it's like my weight went to the highest ever. And I think some of it is like, if I want to do this for as long as I can to be the best that I can be, that's probably not the path I need to stay on. Yeah. So in my house, we have a Peloton, and I have more clothes on the Peloton than I do in my closet. I take them off. I'm like, okay, day one, right? And I get on the Peloton about 3 days, and it's like, oh, God. But so anyway, right now it's just being more aware of the diet, exercising when I can, and, you know, staying away from certain things that probably didn't serve me well over my time. But I appreciate you asking the question. It's certainly better than the alternative.
Yeah. I think it was 30 pounds last I heard.
Yeah, 25, 30 pounds. Yeah. So I'm going to try to keep it stabilized and maybe try to do a little bit better and maybe lose a little bit more here moving forward. So we'll see.
All right. Last question for you. After a win, when you're going home, what's your go-to after a win?
I'd like to tell you I have one. My answer to that is there is no go-to. You know, I'm usually excited, moving on to the next thing.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Simply because that's the difference between football and basketball. Like, today is Sunday. We got home really late last night. That Butler game is going to be on us so fast, your head's going to spin.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would ever want the feeling that we're not the most ready or prepared we can be for whatever is next. So you have to be able to move forward. That's one thing that coaching in the Pac-12 really helped me with, coaching. You know, once you get into conference play in the Pac-12, other than your travel partner, and in our case it would have been Arizona State, you're pretty much locked into playing Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday, once in a while like a Thursday, Saturday, or Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. So think about that. You know, you play in an away game, you leave on a Wednesday, get there, you play that next game, you don't come home in between games. You have the one quick day in between. Oftentimes the second game is played in the afternoon. So how do you go from one thing to the next as best that you can, regardless of whether you won or lost that game? And the NCAA tournament's like that. You know, think about Kennesaw State. Down 10, didn't feel good. We made this epic run to beat them. It was like unbelievable. Not only are you in the tournament, but you survived. You now have a chance to play for the Sweet 16. Well, you're only going to get to the Sweet 16 if you play well in the next game. And how do you do that? You have to be able to leave that game behind, learn from it, and just similar to what we talked about in today's podcast. So I try as best I can to be balanced when it comes to that.
Most people are probably listening to this Tuesday morning, so right before the Butler game. By that time, this game will be over. Steelers, feeling good? How are we feeling?
I think it's a tall order, but with this crazy weather, you know, my people are telling me T.J. Watt potentially is going to play. Don't believe the hype. So can you imagine him coming in there on the blitz in the snow, not expected to play? And, I think my sources are pretty good. So.
You got people just feeding you.
Yeah, almost from the locker room at this point. I've been wired in for so long. But I'd say Steelers 7, Bills 3.
There it is. We'll see on Tuesday morning. We'll see how it turned out. All right, Sean, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Sean Miller Podcast. Xavier taking on Butler this week on Tuesday night, then Georgetown, both here at the Cintas Center on Friday night. As always, we want to thank our sponsors, Deer Park Roofing, payroll partners, TGE Solar, for helping make all this possible. Like, subscribe, comment, share around with your friends, rate, review, and we'll talk to you next time on the Sean Miller Podcast.
This has been the Sean Miller Podcast, presented by Deer Park Roofing, with your hosts, Paul Fritschner and Adam Baum. Join us again soon for another episode with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.